While her cousins got houses and bank accounts, she got a crumbling building worth maybe a few $1,000s. But when she broke through that padlock for the first time in 20 years, what she found inside made her realize her grandfather hadn't given her the worst inheritance. He'd given her the most dangerous one. If you're just tuning in, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And please show us some love with a like and comment below to let us know where you're tuning in from. The rain hammered against the law office windows like angry fists, each droplet carrying the weight of unspoken secrets. Inside the sterile conference room, the scent of old leather and disappointment hung thick in the air. Gina sat motionless, her fingers trembling against the cold mahogany table as the attorney's words echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. To my granddaughter Gina, I leave my most precious possession, the garage on Elm Street. A garage. Not the house. Not the savings account everyone whispered about. Just a crumbling, forgotten structure that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. The other relatives exchanged knowing glances, their lips curling into barely concealed smirks. Poor Gina, they thought, getting the short end of the stick again. But something in the attorney's eyes suggested otherwise. His weathered hands shook slightly as he passed her the keys, 3 of them, each more mysterious than the last. The metal felt unnaturally warm against her palm, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Your grandfather left specific instructions, the attorney whispered, leaning closer. He said you'd understand when the time came. He said you were the only one who would truly see. Gina's heart thundered in her chest. Grandpa Solomon had always been different, speaking in riddles and collecting strange objects. But this felt bigger, more significant. The keys seemed to pulse with an energy she couldn't explain, and suddenly, the garage didn't seem like a consolation prize anymore. The garage squatted on the corner lot like a wounded animal, its paint peeling away in long, tortured strips. Weeds choked the foundation and broken glass littered the driveway like scattered diamonds. Gina stood before it, her stomach churning with a mixture of disappointment and inexplicable anticipation. The neighborhood watched from behind tattered curtains, their eyes following her every movement. Mrs. Henderson from next door emerged, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Child, ain't nobody been in that place for near 20 years, she called out, her voice carrying decades of neighborhood gossip. Your grandfather, God rest his soul, he was mighty protective of that old building. Wouldn't let nobody near it, not even the city inspector." Gina approached the rusted padlock, her fingers finding the first key. It slid in with surprising ease as if the lock had been waiting. The heavy door groaned open, releasing a rush of stale air that carried scents of motor oil, dust, and something else, something sweet and mysterious. Darkness swallowed the interior, broken only by thin shafts of sunlight streaming through cracked windows. But as her eyes adjusted, she saw them, shapes covered in white sheets, standing like ghosts in the shadows. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a garage. This was a tomb of secrets, and she was the first person in 2 decades to witness what lay within. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "Some treasures ain't meant for everyone, baby girl. Some treasures choose their keeper." The first sheet fell away like discarded skin, revealing a pristine 1969 Mustang Boss 429, its candy apple red paint gleaming as if it had just rolled off the showroom floor. Gina's knees nearly buckled. This car was worth more than her annual salary, possibly more than her entire life savings. But it was just the beginning. Each covered shape revealed another impossibility: a 1967 Shelby Cobra, a 1970 Plymouth Cuda, cars that belonged in museums or private collections worth millions. The garage held at least 8 vehicles, each one a masterpiece of American automotive history. Her phone buzzed with notifications as she frantically researched the models. Conservative estimates put the collection's value at over $2 million. Her head spun with the implications. Grandpa Solomon, who'd worn the same threadbare jacket for 15 years, who'd counted every penny, had been sitting on a fortune. "Jesus, Grandpa," she whispered to the dusty air. "What were you thinking?" But as she moved deeper into the garage, something felt wrong. The cars were positioned strangely, creating a narrow pathway that led to the back wall. And there, partially hidden behind the last vehicle, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. A section of the concrete floor was different, newer, smoother. Someone had poured fresh concrete in a perfect rectangle, about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. The dimensions were unsettlingly familiar. Her grandfather's final words came flooding back. The real treasure ain't what you see, baby girl. It's what lies beneath. The sledgehammer felt impossibly heavy in Gina's trembling hands. She'd borrowed it from Mrs. Henderson, claiming she needed to break up some old concrete for renovations. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but the truth would sound insane. The first strike sent vibrations up her arms and dust into the air. The second revealed a hairline crack. By the 10th, she knew she was right. This concrete was recent, maybe 5 years old at most. Her grandfather had been hiding something, and it wasn't just cars. 3 hours later, sweat dripping into her eyes and her shoulders screaming in protest, she broke through. The concrete gave way to reveal a metal box, military-grade and sealed tight. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pried it open with shaking fingers. Inside lay documents, dozens of them. Birth certificates, property deeds, photographs that made her stomach lurch. But it was the journal that stopped her cold. Solomon's handwriting, shakier in recent years but unmistakably his, filled page after page with entries that read like confessions. November 15, 2019. Henry came by again today. Still asking questions about the Henderson family. Still don't know if I can trust him, but the boy's persistent. Reminds me of myself at his age before I learned that some doors shouldn't be opened. Henry. She'd never heard Grandpa mention anyone by that name. But as she flipped through the pages, Henry appeared again and again, always connected to the Hendersons, always asking questions about things that happened decades ago. Her blood chilled as realization dawned. Mrs. Henderson next door, what did she really know about this garage? The knock on the garage door came at exactly midnight, 3 sharp raps that cut through the silence like gunshots. Gina had been expecting it, though she couldn't say why. The journal had mentioned Henry's nocturnal visits, his preference for darkness and secrecy. She opened the door to find a man in his early 30s, tall and lean with eyes that seemed to hold too many secrets. His dark skin glistened with perspiration despite the cool night air, and his hands shook slightly as he lit a cigarette. "You must be Gina," he said, his voice carrying a smooth southern drawl. "I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Your grandfather promised me we'd meet eventually." "Who are you?" she demanded, though part of her already knew. "Henry Jefferson. And before you say anything, I need you to understand something. Your grandfather and we were partners in something that could get us both killed if the wrong people found out." He gestured toward the cars. "This ain't just a collection, sweetheart. This is evidence." The word hit her like a physical blow. Evidence of what? Her mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Henry stepped into the light, and she saw the resemblance immediately. The same strong jawline as Mrs. Henderson, the same piercing eyes. That woman next door? He's my aunt. And she's been watching this garage for 20 years, waiting for someone to finally open it up. But she seems so helpful. She's been playing the long game, Gina. We all have. His expression darkened. Your grandfather stole something that didn't belong to him. Something worth killing for. The old photograph trembled in Gina's hands as Henry held the flashlight steady. Taken in 1987, it showed her grandfather as a young man, standing beside a woman who looked exactly like Mrs. Henderson, but decades younger. Between them stood a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with the same eyes as Henry. "That's my cousin Diane," Henry explained, his voice heavy with old pain. "She disappeared 3 days after this picture was taken. Vanished without a trace, and my family never recovered." Gina's stomach dropped. What does this have to do with my grandfather? Solomon was the last person to see her alive. They were close. Too close, according to some folks. Henry's jaw tightened. The police questioned him, but nothing stuck. Rich white family vouched for his whereabouts that night, said he was working late at their estate. The pieces were starting to form a horrifying picture. Gina flipped through more journal entries, her grandfather's handwriting becoming increasingly erratic with each page. March 3, 2020. The dreams are getting worse. Diane's face, always asking why. Why didn't I tell the truth? Why didn't I save her? The cars were supposed to be my penance, my way of making things right. But nothing can bring her back. He knew what happened to her, she whispered. Henry nodded grimly. And now Mrs. Henderson knows you're here, going through his things. She's been waiting 35 years for answers, Gina. And she ain't the forgiving type. A shadow passed by the garage window, too quick to be coincidental. They weren't alone anymore. "We need to get out of here." Henry grabbed her arm. "Right now." They drove in Henry's battered pickup truck through empty streets, the garage growing smaller in the rearview mirror. Gina clutched the journal against her chest, her mind reeling from each revelation. The comfortable world she'd known was crumbling with every turned page. "Pull over," she demanded suddenly. "I need to read this." Henry parked under a broken streetlight, the darkness providing a false sense of security. Gina opened to a page dated just 2 months before her grandfather's death. January 8, 2024. "Can't take it anymore. The guilt is eating me alive. Diane Henderson didn't run away like everyone thought. She didn't disappear into thin air. She's been here all along, and I'm the only one who knows where." The blood drained from Gina's face. "Henry," she whispered. "What?" The concrete rectangle in the garage floor, it wasn't hiding a treasure box. Her voice cracked. It was hiding her. Henry went completely still. "What are you saying?" "My grandfather killed Diane Henderson 35 years ago, and he buried her under that garage floor." The words felt like poison in her mouth. All those cars, all that money, it was his way of guarding her grave, making sure nobody would ever dig there. The journal slipped from her numb fingers as the full horror sank in. She wasn't just inheriting a fortune, she was inheriting a crime scene. And Mrs. Henderson had been watching that garage for decades, probably suspecting the truth but never able to prove it. Henry's phone buzzed with a text message. His face went white as he read it. "We need to go back," he said urgently. "Right now." The garage was engulfed in flames when they arrived, orange tongues licking at the night sky like demons dancing. Mrs. Henderson stood across the street, her silver hair gleaming in the firelight, a gasoline can at her feet and a satisfied smile on her weathered face. 35 years, she called out as they approached. 35 years I've been watching that cursed place, knowing in my heart what that man did to my baby girl." The cars inside exploded one by one, millions of dollars turning to ash and twisted metal. Gina felt tears streaming down her cheeks, not for the money, but for the truth that was burning away with everything else. "You don't understand," Gina shouted over the roar of flames. "We found proof. We know what happened." Mrs. Henderson's expression never wavered. "Child, I've known what happened since the day she disappeared. Your grandfather may have fooled the police, may have fooled the whole neighborhood, but he never fooled me." Henry stepped forward, his hands raised in surrender. "Aunt Emma, we were going to tell the authorities. We were going to make this right." "Making it right?" Emma Henderson's laugh was bitter and cold. "The only thing that makes this right is that garage becoming a tomb, just like it made my Diane into one." She pulled something from her coat pocket, a small revolver that caught the firelight. "You want to know the real truth? Your grandfather didn't act alone that night. He had help from someone who's been hiding in plain sight for 35 years. Her eyes fixed on Henry with chilling intensity. "Someone who's been playing the concerned nephew awfully well." Gina's world tilted on its axis as she looked at Henry with new eyes. The gun in Mrs. Henderson's hand never wavered as she spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos of sirens approaching in the distance. Henry wasn't just asking questions about his missing cousin, Honey. He was making sure nobody else would. Gina backed away from Henry, pieces of a horrific puzzle clicking into place. "You knew," she breathed. "You've known all along where Diane was." Henry's friendly facade cracked like ice, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Your grandfather was getting sloppy in his old age. Started writing everything down, started having nightmares that made him talk in his sleep. Someone had to clean up his mess." "You killed him," Gina whispered. "My grandfather didn't die of natural causes. A little extra morphine in his drip at the hospital. Easy enough when you work as an orderly." Henry's smile was pure evil. He was going to confess, Gina. 35 years of keeping quiet, and the old fool was going to throw it all away because of guilty dreams. Mrs. Henderson's grip tightened on the gun. "Henry helped your grandfather bury my baby that night. He was only 15, but he was strong enough to dig. And scared enough to keep quiet when Solomon promised him a share of those cars someday." The flames behind them were dying down, taking with them the last physical evidence of the crime. But the truth was finally burning bright, illuminating decades of lies and murder. The inheritance was never about giving you something, Gina, Henry continued. It was about making sure someone trustworthy would take over guardianship of the secret. Someone who wouldn't go digging too deep. But he'd underestimated her completely. Fire trucks arrived with a symphony of sirens, their red lights painting the night in bloody hues. But before the firefighters could approach, Gina pulled out her phone and held it high, the screen glowing with an active video call. "Detective Rodriguez, are you getting all this?" she called out. Henry's face went white as he realized his confession had been broadcast live to the police station. Mrs. Henderson lowered her gun slightly, a mixture of surprise and admiration crossing her weathered features. "I started recording the moment we left the garage," Gina explained, her voice steadier than she felt. "My grandfather taught me something important. Always have a backup plan. He might have been a killer, but he was also smart enough to leave me more than just cars and concrete." She pulled out a second phone from her jacket pocket. "GPS tracking on Henry's truck, audio recordings of every conversation we've had tonight, and copies of every page in that journal uploaded to cloud storage before we even left the garage." Detective Rodriguez's voice crackled through the phone speaker. "Henry Jefferson, you're under arrest for the murders of Solomon Jackson and conspiracy in the murder of Diane Henderson. You have the right to remain silent." Henry lunged toward Gina, but Mrs. Henderson stepped between them, the gun now pointed directly at his chest. "You ain't running this time, boy. You've been running for 35 years and it ends tonight." The police cars surrounded them, officers emerging with weapons drawn. But the real showdown was between the three people who had been bound together by secrets and lies for far too long. "There's one more thing," Gina said as the handcuffs clicked around Henry's wrists. "Grandpa's real inheritance wasn't the garage or the cars. The basement beneath the garage had been hidden by a false wall, invisible until the fire damaged the structure enough to reveal its secrets. Inside, Detective Rodriguez and his team found what Solomon Jackson had really been protecting all these years. Not Diane Henderson's body, that had been moved long ago, but her voice. Dozens of cassette tapes, meticulously labeled and dated, contained recordings of a little girl who had been held captive for months before her death. Her voice, growing weaker with each recording, told a story of unimaginable horror that made even the hardened investigators weep. "She was alive down there for almost a year," Detective Rodriguez explained to Gina and Mrs. Henderson as they sat in the police station. "Your grandfather didn't kill her that night, he kidnapped her. And Henry brought her food, kept her alive while they figured out what to do." Mrs. Henderson's hands shook as she held one of the tapes. Her granddaughter's voice, preserved for decades, telling stories and singing songs even as she begged to go home. "The last recording is from December 1988, the detective continued gently. "Diane talks about being sick, about being scared. She asks Solomon to please let her see her grandmother one more time." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and Mrs. Henderson's soft sobbing. "Your grandfather kept these tapes because he couldn't bring himself to destroy them," Rodriguez explained to Gina. "But he also couldn't face what they represented. So he built that garage into a fortress, protecting evidence that would destroy him while torturing himself with the memory of what he'd done." Gina felt hollow inside, scraped clean by the magnitude of her family's sins. "Where is she buried?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her voice barely a whisper. The construction site had been abandoned for 15 years, weeds growing through cracked concrete and rusted machinery standing like monuments to forgotten dreams. But the ground-penetrating radar didn't lie. Something was buried beneath the foundation of what was supposed to be a shopping mall. Diane Henderson had been moved here in 1989, when Solomon Jackson realized that keeping her under the garage was too risky. Henry, now 18 and strong enough to help with the grisly task, had driven the backhoe that dug her final resting place. Mrs. Henderson stood at the edge of the excavation site, her small frame wrapped in a black coat despite the warm afternoon sun. Gina stayed close, unsure of her role in this tragic resolution but unable to abandon the woman who had spent decades searching for answers. "She would have been 50 years old next month," Mrs. Henderson whispered as the forensics team worked with careful precision. "She wanted to be a teacher, you know. Used to line up her dolls and teach them their letters." The small skeleton they uncovered still wore the faded remains of a yellow dress, the same dress from the photograph in Solomon's journal. Diane Henderson had finally come home. Henry Jefferson had plea bargained for life without parole, trading information about the burial site for the promise of avoiding the electric chair. In his confession, he revealed the twisted logic that had governed their actions. Diane had seen too much, knew too much about other crimes Solomon had committed as part of a burglary ring that targeted wealthy families. One dead child was supposed to protect them from exposure for dozens of other crimes, Detective Rodriguez explained. But guilt has a way of eating people alive, and your grandfather spent the rest of his life trying to atone for the unforgivable. 6 months later, Gina stood in the empty lot where her grandfather's garage once stood. The city had demolished what remained after the fire, and plans were underway for a memorial garden dedicated to missing children. Mrs. Henderson had insisted on funding it with the insurance money from the car collection. The old woman approached slowly, her cane tapping against the concrete sidewalk. Age had settled more heavily on her shoulders since Diane's remains were found, but there was peace in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I never thanked you properly," Mrs. Henderson said, stopping beside Gina, "for having the courage to dig when you could have just sold those cars and walked away rich." Gina shook her head. "I didn't have a choice. Diane deserved justice, even if it came 35 years too late." They stood in comfortable silence, two women bound together by tragedy but working toward healing. The memorial garden would have a playground, benches for reflection, and a small fountain with Diane's name engraved in stone. "Henry wrote me a letter from prison," Mrs. Henderson said suddenly. "He wanted me to know that Diane talked about me every day she was down there. Said she wasn't scared because she knew her grandmother would find her eventually." Tears blurred Gina's vision. She was right. The hardest part is forgiving myself for not looking harder, for not trusting my instincts about that garage. Mrs. Henderson's voice cracked slightly. "But Diane always was smarter than the rest of us. She left you that inheritance because she knew you were the one person who wouldn't stop digging until you found the truth." As the sun set behind them, painting the empty lot in shades of gold and amber, Gina realized that some inheritances are worth more than money. Some legacies demand justice no matter the cost. Her grandfather had left her something more valuable than cars or cash. He had left her the chance to set things right. Thanks for watching. Give us a like if you liked the video and share with us in the comments what you think about this lovely tale. We always enjoy reading your comments.